Welcome, listeners, and thanks for joining us again. We have an awesome, amazing, fantastic uh, guest with us today. A really special treat. His name is Scott Sussman, and he's a writer of picture books and middle grade. And usually he has a really busy schedule. But we were lucky they were able to. One benefit of everything changing is that we were able to get him today. So we're very lucky today. Scott, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, thank you. So let's just get right into it. Please tell us how did we get to this point? How did you become a writer and you started publishing? How did all that come about?
Well, for me, I guess the beginning was certainly as a reader. I remember as a kid, my big favorite were the Snoopy books, Peanuts. I used to read those books over and over again. And in fact, when I was in second and third grade, I used to take 5 or 6 pieces of blank white paper. I would fold them in half and staple the fold for a binding, and then I would draw a cover, count the pages so I could divide my story up, and then I would draw pictures and words in the pages. And of course, my main character back then was usually Snoopy. And
Right.
I would sell them to other students for 25 cents a copy for milk money back when milk cost only 25 cents.
That
And
is
I kept writing along over the years just for fun. And when I got to college, the question was, what do I want to major in? And when I realized that you could major in creative writing, I figured, well, gosh, I'm already writing. So that would be an easy way to get my degree.
right.
And then from there, just one thing led to another.
That is fantastic. So do you like own the whole Peanuts collection now, or you've since moved on from there?
I got rid of those books a long time ago, but I will still occasionally, check out one of Charles Schulz's cartoons and get a kick out of it.
Um, so well, I have a question. I'm also wondering because Peanuts as the cartoon, did you appreciate? Because when you read Peanuts as an adult, that's a little bit different than when you're reading it as a kid. Do you know if you were like, can you say of yourself like, oh, I really got the nuance of that, or was it just oh, I just like Peanuts?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I caught the nuance. You know what I remember, though, is watching a cartoon, a Looney Tunes cartoon with Bugs Bunny. And it was the one when he goes back in time to medieval times. And I can't remember the whole part, but he meets this knight and he's saying, all of his titles, the Baron of this, and the King of that,
Right.
and Sir Osis of the liver. And I thought, of course, as a kid, I didn't get cirrhosis of the liver.
Right.
So, even those cartoons would kind of operate on 2 different levels.
That's actually a really good point. Well, okay, we're kind of jumping ahead there, but do you ever do that in your picture books? So you kind of throw in a line that's for the parents that the kids might not appreciate, or you're like, I'm talking to kids. This is just for the kids. Like, they're my audience. Let's get real.
Yeah, I don't know if I do it intentionally, but I have to say there are times when I think, gosh, this is going to, I sort of think the lines are blurred where when I do that, it would appeal to the child and the parent, but maybe just from different perspectives. And so you could appreciate from a young age, and then at an older age, kind of like maybe this is an interesting comparison because Herman Hesse was obviously not a children's book writer,
Right.
but when I read his books at different stages of my life, in my 20s, in my 30s, in my 40s, and I find something new and different every time because he was just so profound and so
Right.
deep.
Right.
I appreciated those books very much when in my 20s, but I absolutely, especially a book like Steppenwolf, was much more able to appreciate it on a new level when I was in my 40s. But again, I appreciated it at every level.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Right. Well, even though, because I know they do that with cartoons, right? Because they know that the parents are taking the kids to see or animated film, I should say. So because the parents are taking the kid, they really throw in lines for the parents because the parents have to sit through the film anyway. So picture book, parents are reading it to the kids, but then again, you also want the kid to be able to take the book and whether or not they're actually reading it, but because they know the story, they could flip through still and sort of say the story. No, it's just an interesting
Absolutely.
thing yeah. So why is the drawing the Snoopy kind of what led you to picture books, or why did you choose picture books? Well, and you write middle grade, but why did you choose picture books?
Yeah, there's, one thing is just when you write for kids, like anything's possible, right?
Right.
But, tables can walk and talk, French fries can refuse to be eaten, your socks can complain that your feet stink.
Right.
And for me, that's fun. But also when you write for children, you write for every age, because adults can read and appreciate children's books, but children rarely read and appreciate books written for adults. So writing for children, I'm able to reach readers when they have their whole lives ahead of them. And in this way, maybe I can transmit a lifelong love of reading, or plant a positive seed that stays in readers' minds for the entire journeys of their lives.
Right.
I think another reason really is that life's serious enough as it is. I mean, you wake up to an alarm clock, you fight traffic, pay bills, pay taxes.
Right.
So to write about betrayal or tragedy or violence would be boring to me. And besides, there's more than enough of that on television and in the newspapers. So I prefer to spend my time on an activity that's amusing and magical, and children's books tend to be exactly that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Well, just only because you mentioned a seed. So I think it was your first book is Silly the Seed.
Yes.
So how does a book like Silly the Seed, did you see Silly the Seed first, or you kind of got the punchline of the book first, and then you went backwards to try to create the story?
Yeah, Silly the Seed was one of those exceptions, in the sense when the writing comes to you, obviously most of the time inspiration doesn't strike. You just sit down, it's a discipline, and you do the work.
Right.
But when you're lucky, sometimes you have that bolt of inspiration that does strike you. And that's what Silly the Seed was. In fact, it was right when, my first love when I was let's say, when I started college, was poetry. And I do still love poetry and read it. I do write a little bit, but not as much as I used to. And then I started writing about my life and kind of some memoirs and stuff. And that was when I realized at a certain point that I preferred writing for kids, because, as I mentioned, anything's possible.
Right.
And so I sat down and thought, well, let's try that. Let's write something for a child. And I was eating sunflower seeds at the time, and I thought, all right, well, a seed would be an interesting character. And from there, it practically wrote itself, really. I just thought, this is the story of Silly the Seed. And from there, almost like a song in my head, it just started writing itself. And I just wrote the words that I was hearing in my head. That's not something that happens often, unfortunately.
Right,
but
yeah.
That was one of the times when it did.
See, that's actually a magical story, because every writer wants to have the book that kind of flows out of you without you having to try to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, of course, part of the fun, is it's almost like, say, climbing a mountain. If you just appeared at the top, what would the gain be? I mean, you really wouldn't appreciate it as much. But with all the hard work that writers do, it is nice every once in a while when you get, whether it's a whole story like Silly the Seed, or even just a paragraph or a page, or 5 or 6 pages in a row. But as I said, for me anyway, that doesn't happen often, unfortunately.
Right. Well, that's actually, especially because you have the picture book perspective and the middle grade perspective, I think a lot of people think that picture books are probably easier to write than, let's say, a novel. But especially you, not just being a writer, but having both perspectives, can you even say that one's easier to write than the other? Or just because there's less words in a picture book doesn't make it any easier?
Yeah, it depends on your definition of easy, because it's certainly shorter, but no matter what, at the same time, when you're writing for that young, I remember, my niece when she was 3 or 4, and I would read her a book. I mean, as soon as one word, if she lost an interest at one word or one sentence, that was it, close the book.
Wow.
She'd close it for me.
Yeah.
And luckily that never happened with my books.
Yeah.
But that's how kids are at that age. As soon as you lose them, you've lost them. So sometimes it can be even more difficult. And it is like a poem to a certain extent, a picture book, because every single word really has to pack a punch. And at the same time, keep in mind that the writing is only half of it. The illustrations are the other half. Right. So there's that to consider. I mean, it definitely takes more time, and you're thinking on a lot of different levels with novels, because there's the paragraphs and the length of the paragraphs and the sentences, strong verbs, and showing instead of telling. But it's a different approach to writing completely. So it's hard to say that it's, maybe some writers, a certain type of writing comes easier than another, perhaps.
Right.
But for me, I find it still, you toil through it, and take it day by day, and then you go back through it again and again and again. And sometimes, even though it's shorter, like a picture book, it may take, I don't want to say just as long as a novel, but in terms of hours, but maybe in terms of days, because I'll work on it and read through it so many times, and then I'll put it aside and work on something else. When it's a novel, I'm just working on that straight for months.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that I can relate to.
Yeah, I can imagine, right?
So as you're someone, because you're illustrating your own work, do you write everything first and then you illustrate, or you kind of go back and forth? Are you seeing it as you're writing it? Or depends which book it is? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I've only illustrated 3 of my books.
Oh, okay.
Another 4 of them were illustrated by another person, and then my novel was illustrated by another person.
Wow, okay.
And the books I illustrated are very simple. I actually originally thought about I self-published, so I was going to get somebody to illustrate them in my place and to give them an idea of what I thought the illustrations maybe should look like, which I realize now is kind of a no-no, but back then I didn't realize. And so I showed them to a very talented illustrator, and he said, I can tell you the truth, these illustrations are perfect because it's a very simple story and very simple illustrations. And if you see the illustrations that were done by more professional illustrators, they're absolutely dynamite. I mean, really, really fantastic. While the irony is I sell more copies of the books I illustrated. And I don't really know. I think maybe that's just because that kids see the illustrations and they really relate to them. Because I can't really imagine. Maybe I don't really know why, but sometimes I'll have even people when I'm at a festival or a fair, and they'll come up and they go, "Oh my God, I love these illustrations." They're talking about mine.
Oh, wow.
I'm thinking, really? Because these are just, the other ones are dynamite.
Right.
But it's always a compliment anyway.
Yeah, that is kind of funny. So now that you did mention the self-publishing, so we'll go into that a little bit. So your press is officially Octopus Inc. Press, right? So
yeah, and I'm kind of moving toward Scott Sussman books. I mean, Octopus Inc. Press still exists, but I have a lot of books now. I'm up to 8.
Wow.
And that, one of the challenges with 8 books is that that's 26,000 copies of books. So my storage space is overflowing. Plus, nobody can be good at everything, right? Writing the book, editing the book, designing the book. So now I'm in the market for an agent to hopefully spearhead my future writings, and hopefully I'll be able to reach more readers that way. I'd like to continue to self-publish the books I have so far,
right? But
just with an agent, the things I'm working on now. And I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
Oh, that's okay.
Why?
Well, I was going to ask why you chose, why would you, because you actually sort of introduced a new element to the question. Why would you name it, why would you have originally named it Octopus Inc. Press instead of Scott Sussman Books? Instead of using your name for it, why would you choose to, name it something else, and why would you have gone in the self-publishing direction originally?
Exactly. So I chose to self-publish because I lived in Italy for 13 years. So meeting American agents and editors was impossible from there. And even if I did publish a book, I was there. So how am I going to promote the book here?
Right.
Ironically, self-publishing is what brought me back to the States 3 years ago. Because, in 1 month a year of visiting schools here and touring in the States, I was making the same amount of money I was making teaching English the other 11 months in Rome.
Oh, wow.
So, again, my reason to choose that route was because I was far away, and I couldn't go. I was a member of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, but not an active member because I was there. And I thought, well, let's just try it and see what happens. In fact, what spawned the idea was I was getting, that was when Facebook started taking off, and I was getting messages from people who remembered me from before and knew that I was writing for children and now had children.
Right.
And they wanted to know where to buy my stories. And by about the 10th email like that I got, I felt terrible because I had all these stories on my computer, and I wanted to share them with these people who have children. And that's why I started self-publishing. That with Silly the Seed, I would fly home from Italy twice a year. Well, in the beginning, just once a year. And I would, organize a book tour in mostly Orange County at the beginning, and then spread in San Diego County, and then LA and Riverside and other areas, Temecula. And again, one thing led to another, and it was just doing so well. It got to be difficult to live there and manage the business here. Like I got an Amazon order, I'd have to email my parents, and they'd have to send it. So it just got to be kind of ridiculous to be there and expect people to, help me with my business here.
Right. Well, with things taking off, how much of your day is promotion? Well, you also that you do a lot of school visits. How much of your day is really doing that, and how much can you really spend on writing or doing other things?
So my writing time, I write every day,
Okay.
and I would probably describe myself. People often ask you as a writer. I would say I'm disciplined.
Okay.
I write every day, 4 to 6 hours,
Wow.
and a minimum of 2 hours when I'm visiting a school, library, or a bookstore, or when I have a booth at a fair or a festival.
Wow.
So this year, 2020, no, but previously I was doing about 80 to 100 book-related events a year.
Wow.
So on those days when I actually have an event, that's when I'm getting in about 2 hours. So, going to a school involves waking up early, and if the school's nearby, it's, nice, but often I'm driving an hour or so to the school, and then I unload my car and I set up. I like to make it kind of exciting when the kids enter the room. So I've got posters and a tablecloth, and I set the books and kind of decorate the area. That takes time. And then I usually do about 3 presentations, 3 45-minute presentations, and I'll come back after school because it's more convenient for students to buy books then sometimes than buying them before, and they tend to be more excited anyway.
Right.
And
Right.
then by the time that's done and I get home, it could be 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. And I, really quickly just kind of get ready and get my writing in. And at that point, it's time for dinner and spending quality time with my wife.
Right. Are you at the point now where most of these events are word of mouth, or do you have to do a lot of advertising and cold calling for these events?
Yeah, I was definitely doing a lot of cold emailing.
Right. Yeah.
I think when you're contacting schools, I worked in schools too. It's way easier for people to get an email than trying to pin them down, because it's often the librarian or the principal but over, each year it seems like, I get more and more people contacting me than me contacting them. So I do still contact mostly schools, but it's always nice when I get an email or a phone call, or somebody heard of me here or got my number there or had my brochure from a fair or a festival. And so, that transition was sort of happening. And that's quite satisfying.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. Because it takes so much of your time to do all the other parts. So if someone's calling you first, then that means you didn't have to take the time to call them or
Oh,
email them. Yeah.
totally. Oh, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's good. Good for you. Um, do you so back to your own press that you had? Do you hire an editor, or were you just doing everything?
With the novel, I hired an editor because at that level, I wanted to make sure that I got something out there that was as good as it can be. With the picture books, it was mostly me. I have a childhood friend. We've been friends since preschool, who's very creative, always has been since even when we were kids,
Right.
and worked at Disney. And, he's seen the worst of me in terms of my writing. He gets my first drafts, and I love, he'll just tell me, I hate this, I can't stand that, fix this, change. There's no sugarcoating whatsoever.
Right.
Completely brutal, pulls no punches. But I love that. And we've been friends for so long that I don't take it personally at all. And I kind of think I'm very unlike most artists in the sense that I am always very, very open to constructive criticism. I never take it personally. Yeah, it can be frustrating in the sense that, you feel like this thing's as good as you can get it, and then you get the feedback, and you think, oh, wow. I mean, it can be devastating, but over the years, I've weeded out people, mostly friends and, people I know that can help me as a beta reader.
Right. Right.
And you get people that just say, oh, it's great, fantastic. Or sometimes they give you suggestions that you think, where does that come from?
Right.
So over the years, I've weeded those people out, and I've got it down to about, I'm not only 3 or 4 people that I'm able to share my early drafts with, but I'm also in a writer's group. So there's 6 of us, and they're a big help as well.
Right. Well, that's actually a good point because there are times when you feel like I've gone over this so many times. What more can I do with it? And then all of a sudden someone says something to you and you're like, oh, wait a second, I never thought of it like that. And then next thing you know, you're rewriting everything, but it's better, which is obviously the ideal situation to get to that.
Yeah, and it's, well, when you find a person that just speaks your language as an editor, it's a gift from God, really, because it's hard. I've worked with lots of editors, and I just don't get what they're saying. And it's not their fault. It's just, again, they don't really speak my language
Right.
in terms of editing.
Right.
And what I found is, I think my problem, at least, I don't know if it's a problem, I suspect a lot of writers go through this, is, it's all in my head.
Right, exactly.
So I almost think that I said something, and I realize when the editor comes back and said, like, I'll give you an example with the story I'm working on now that I just got some feedback on. And there's just to keep it simple, this character simply gets up, and it's kind of a scary scene. So he gets up, crosses the room, enters this hallway, goes through the hallway, and there's a room at the end of the hallway. And the editor's saying, well, when did they get through the hallway? When did they reach suddenly the doorway is a hallway? And
right.
And I'm thinking, isn't that pretty obvious? Like, it was 4 sentences walking through the hallway. How did you not see that? But all I had to do was just rework it a little bit, add a couple of words here and maybe one more sentence there to make it perfectly clear that this person had went from room to hallway to another room at the end of the hallway. So, again, when it's in your head, it's perfectly clear in your head, but the reader's not always getting it. And that's where somebody who knows how to edits in a way that you understand is, again, a godsend.
Right. Well, it kind of sounds like when you're looking for an editor, it's almost, I don't want to say dumb luck, but it's kind of luck, because no matter how good the editor is, like, you don't really know if you're going to fit their style. And that you don't really know, just because they said, oh, I edited this book, unless they show you before and after page, you don't really know what kind of work they did or how they work with you or anything like that. So I don't know, you just keep shopping until you find the person, or you just hope for the best?
Exactly. Like I said, I've just had to weed people out. I've worked with lots of editors, and mostly I found, in my earlier, it was people I knew mostly, and later it was just trying somebody online, and I've found that most will just, like, there's constructive criticism and there's destructive criticism.
Right.
And you really have no time for destructive criticism. There's a problem here, great, but how about, maybe either you have to clarify this, or here's some suggestions of how you could rectify that scene. And when I get that, I guess that's just the way, some people are visual learners, some people learn with their ears, some people need hands-on, some people need all three to really, be able to learn in an effective way.
Right.
So I don't know what it is exactly, but I've, again, just found a few people that really seem to have a way that when they say there's a problem here, I totally get where they're coming from, and I'm able to make the changes.
Right. Yeah, that's so true, because you have to be able to trust each other. Like, I know that what you're saying is correct and good for me and my story, and not just you're saying stuff, whether or not it's correct or not, but it doesn't help me right now. Like, this is not helpful. Right.
Right.
So why, if you do so many events and, you're selling and you're able to be a self-published writer, why would you want to switch over to get an agent?
Yeah. Well, again, the reason, it's really simple, just because, like I said, I have 8 books, and I have 26,000 copies of 8 books. So that's a lot of storage space. Not only do I have a storage unit, which is overflowing with boxes of books,
Well,
but I have the books in my closet, boxes of books in my parents' closet,
Wow.
boxes of books in my car, boxes of books in my wife's car, and we're just overflowing. So if I was to publish another book, I don't know where I'd even put, where I would store the copy. So that was the thinking, and also to sort of create a synergy between the self-published books and hopefully the future traditionally published books. I feel like I might be able to reach more readers having a team on my side instead of trying to do everything myself. As I mentioned, nobody can be good at everything.
Right.
Writing the book, editing the book, designing the book. So I would like to see what I could do if I had a whole professional team working with me, and all of us working together to try to put something out there that's as absolutely as good as it can be, and it's not, 90% me.
Right. Well, I guess your only other option is to put your own team together, but that's also, you're going to have to go through the whole weeding and everything, and that doesn't necessarily get you the audience you want. So, yeah, that's a good point. That's like funny. Like it doesn't when you come, you say, "Oh, I'm a successful self-published author." That doesn't automatically. That's not like a highlighter around your name. I guess because everything's so
That's
subjective. Yeah.
yeah. It's funny because my friends will always say it. They always say they're always proud, and they think I think that I'm successful.
Right.
Uh, I'm kind of a perfectionist in the sense that, which is a blessing and a curse. And it's a blessing because you work as hard as you can to make something as good as it can be. But it's also a curse because it never is as good as it can be.
Right.
I'm never 100% say. Every time I see something I've done, I think, oh, I could have changed that word, or I could have made this better.
Yeah.
And that can be frustrating at times, but you learn to live with it.
That is so true. I try not to. If I ever have to revisit something that's been published, I just have to shut down a part of my brain because if not, you really could go crazy from why did I do it like that, or because it's X amount
Yeah.
of time later and you got X amount of time, X amount better. You're like, man, I could have done it differently. Like,
Well, Woody Allen, the filmmaker and comedian, he
right.
apparently, and I've read interviews and whatnot, he apparently has never watched any of his films after they're completed.
Oh wow.
And I don't know that I would never read one of my books once it's been published or something like that. Of course, I read them all the time when I'm visiting schools, but
Right.
I get that. I think it just would be a trauma for him to see the finished product and go, that is just absolutely not what I had in my mind.
Wow.
It's funny, somebody who's made as many films as he's made and hasn't even watched one of them.
Right. Well, there is a point because after you've spent so much time, from writing and working on something, there's a point that you're like, if I have to read that one more time, I'm just going to throw something.
I'm right there with today's my last day on this project, and I'm gonna take a break from it for probably a month or two, and then I'll go back to it. But yeah, I'm at that point. I've read it over so many times. But it's pretty much done, at least for the next draft. We'll see what the next beta reader has to say.
Right. Right. Exactly. I'm just actually curious now. I mean, I guess you mentioned poetry. What do you read now? Are you reading a lot of kids' books now, or what are you reading as in like your own pleasure / research? Like, what do you do on your own when you're doing reading for your own time? Like, what kind of stuff do you read?
Yeah. Well, right now I'm reading. I'm trying to read as much middle grade as possible. I've been having, especially with all the free time I've had now because of the COVID-19 and whatnot.
Right.
I've been writing daily. And my routine is to wake up and write for 2 or 3 hours in the morning, and then I'll write for 2 or 3 hours in the evening. And I've written a new one that I've set aside for a couple months that I'm going to go revisit probably in another few weeks.
Right.
And I got around that time some feedback on a novel that I've been working on for a few more weeks. And so I like to immerse myself in that genre of middle grade. So in particular, because what was it? I don't know. I'm losing track of time. A few weeks ago, they announced some of the Newbery, books that have gotten so many votes. And
Oh yeah, that's like a week or two ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was there? Linda Sue Parks' Lotus Prairie, which was very nice, and Ernesto Cisneros' Ephraim Divided, which is a fantastic book. And there's a lot of great ones. There's another one I can't. The name is it called How to Catch a Tiger? I believe. I can't right now. The author's name is but this is what I've been reading lately.
Because that's what you're working on now, the middle grade.
Correct.
Oh, that's good. See, that's good to know. A lot of people, like I once had someone say to me something about wanting to be a writer. So I said, "Oh, what do you read?" He said, "I don't really read." I said, "Well, good luck." I think people don't realize. Yeah.
I find that funny. I know. More power to them if they can do it. But reading is that's my first love. I was really reading before I was actually writing.
Yeah. I guess that also
Stories.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, good. We're almost exactly on our time here. So just to wrap up, I always ask, what is something? Either you can answer this either as a writer, or as a publisher. I love it when writers / or publishers do X, and I really don't like it when they do X. How would you fill in those blanks?
Well, I would say I like when writers support other writers, by writing laudatory reviews online and sharing the book's cover and title on social media or whatever. writers today compete with video games, movies, the radio, life itself. So we all need all the help we can get.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess the opposite of that would be when writers criticize other writers publicly. I'm not so bothered if you want to tell me what you think privately,
Right.
or a small group of friends. But, in the words of Benjamin Franklin, for example, I will speak ill of no man and speak all the good I know of everybody.
Right.
So it really isn't helpful to, criticize another writer online or publicly or anything. Just keep those opinions to yourself, I would say.
Oh, that's actually great. Because I always think sometimes people think, oh, there's only so much room at the top. Well, it's like, well, if you get more readers, then more people are buying books. So we win. We can all win.
Yeah, you're right. And we're, in a sense, we're a family.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's a good
I
point.
would feel way at home when I'm at a SCBWI event and I'm surrounded by other kids book writers and whatnot, especially like the summer conference and whatnot. I just feel like, wow, these are my people and this is where I belong.
Oh yeah, that's so true. That's a very good point. Okay, well that's a good thing to end off with. Our peoples. Okay, well Scott, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your time and we appreciate all that you had to share with us. And where people can find you. So what's your website now that people can find you at?
So it's scottsussmanbooks.com.
Okay, great. And I'll put the website with a link in the episode notes so that way people can find you there. So great. Thank you so much. And we wish you much, much success in wherever, upward and onward, wherever you're going to do from here.
Well, thank you very much, and the same to you.
Oh, thank you.
I know you've got many books out there as well. And quite a list, in fact.
Yeah, well, 8 too. So, and we keep working, right? There's always another one.
Yeah, well, that's part of the beauty of it, isn't it?
Oh, man, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure.